Haruai stares down at her trembling hands, asking herself how everything ended up like this. She covers her mouth, looking traumatized by a sight she desperately wishes she hadn't just witnessed. A few hours earlier, she was sitting alone at a cafe, scrolling through her phone and looking at a photo of her boyfriend, Nataka. In the picture, he was smiling with a genuine warmth she feels she hasn't seen in a long time. She finished her drink, feeling annoyed that he still hadn't replied to her texts, even though they had promised to meet up and head home together after their separate year-end parties. She thought back to that morning, which had been a chaotic struggle. Nataka had refused to wake up, mumbling complaints about being busy while looking at his phone, forcing Haruai to yell at him to get out of bed. As he lazily brushed his teeth, he barked orders at her to find his suit, shirt, and socks, acting completely dependent on her. Haruai sighed at his worn-out toothbrush and the holes in his socks, frustrated that he was so careless with his belongings and expected her to manage everything. He had eventually rushed out the door, shouting that he was late, and casually told her he would text her later, leaving her behind. Later that evening, walking with her colleagues, Haruai turned down an invitation to go to karaoke. A younger coworker teased her about being lovey-dovey with her boyfriend of 6 years, not knowing that Haruai felt their spark had faded into a dull domestic routine, despite his recent marriage proposal. She reminisced about the beginning of their relationship, when Nataka was just a client named Tanaka who visited her design firm. Back then, he was funny and sincere, sometimes visiting her for just 10 minutes on busy days, making her feel incredibly loved before they moved in together. Deciding to stop waiting at the cafe, Haruai headed toward the station and suddenly spotted Nataka in the crowd. She called out his name, relieved to see him, but he turned around with a cold, distant expression. Instead of coming to her, he dismissed her, telling her to go home alone because he was going to an after-party. Haruai stood frozen as she noticed a young woman clinging tightly to Nataka's arm. The girl looked back at Haruai with a sharp gaze, while Nataka looked down at the girl with that genuine, happy smile Haruai had been missing for so long. Stumbling onto the train, Haruai tried to rationalize what she had seen, but the physical shock was too much. Overwhelmed by nausea, she fell to the floor and vomited right near a stranger's shoes. The other passengers recoiled in disgust, complaining about the smell and calling her a nuisance. Mortified, she apologized, but a hand suddenly appeared offering her a handkerchief. A man in a suit knelt beside her, telling her not to worry about the mess and to just cover her mouth. He suggested she get off at the next station and, seeing she was too weak to stand, offered to help her. He asked her to hold his business bag, and then, with effortless strength, he lifted her up into his arms. As he carried her off the train, Haruai looked up at his face. His deep voice and dazzling presence were unmistakable. She realized she was being rescued by the sales department's ace, Itsuki Mamiya. Haruai thinks back to her first days in the sales department, where her best friend Kazumi introduced her to the team's ace, Itsuki Mamiya. He was rumored to be the president's nephew and a high-spec guy, but when they first met, he simply stared at her with an intensity that made her self-conscious. In the present, Mamiya reveals he remembers her name because Kazumi had fought to hire her. Impressed by his kindness as he buys her a towel, Haruai admits she isn't a good person. She only helped the sick passenger to avoid looking bad in public. Mamiya laughs and calls her honest, sharing that he slipped out of his own party because his friends tease him for being creepy at karaoke, trying to make her feel less embarrassed about her own situation. Haruai retreats to the restroom to clean her skirt, but the stain won't come out. She realizes this skirt was Nataka's first birthday gift to her 6 years ago, triggering a painful memory of her recent 34th birthday. Nataka had completely forgotten the day, only offering a casual apology and a suggestion to eat ramen when she reminded him. That night, sensing her withdrawal, he had suddenly proposed, saying, "Then marry me." Haruai accepted out of a desire for stability and children, but deep down, she felt it was a hollow gesture just to fix the mood, lacking the love she once felt from him. Overwhelmed by the realization that she has nowhere to go and no coat to keep her warm, Haruai leaves the restroom in tears. Mamiya is waiting for her and silently drapes his coat over her shoulders, enveloping her in warmth. He offers to take her home in a taxi, but as she stumbles into his arms, a familiar voice calls out her name. Nataka has found them. Haruai stands sandwiched between the two men outside her apartment building, the tension palpable in the air. Nataka breaks the silence with an accusatory tone, questioning why Haruai is only getting back now and why Mamiya was walking her to her room. Before Haruai can fully explain, Mamiya politely introduces himself as her colleague from the same department. Nataka demands to know why a coworker is with her, So Mamiya calmly explains the incident on the train where a stranger vomited, ruining Harui's clothes. He adds that because it was late and Harui's coat was soiled, he lent her his and walked her home. While Mamiya insists it was only natural to help a colleague, Nataka makes a snide remark about Harui causing trouble for others. Harui scolds Nataka for his rudeness, and Mamiya excuses himself, leaving the couple alone. Once inside, the atmosphere turns volatile. Nataka immediately interrogates Harui about her lateness and notices the scent of women's perfume on Mamiya's coat. He demands to know why they were hugging outside, and though Harui explains she simply tripped and Mamiya caught her, Nataka dismisses it with a sarcastic, "Of course." In a burst of aggression, he yanks Mamiya's coat off her shoulders, sneering at how expensive it looks and how handsome her coworker is. Harui tries to turn the tables, asking why Nataka is home early when he was supposed to be at an after-party. Nataka lies, claiming a colleague got sick, and plays the victim, saying he was worried about her only to find her flirting with another guy. Harui is furious at the accusation. Suddenly, Nataka takes a phone call. His demeanor shifts instantly from aggressive to gentle as he asks the person on the other end, presumably the woman from the station, if they made it home safe. Harui watches him, recognizing a gentle voice and a scent she doesn't know, and begins to doubt his previous marriage proposal. Nataka ends the call and dismissively tells Harui to stop whining and go to bed, refusing to discuss the situation further. When Harui tries to protest his earlier insults, he lectures her about how it looks to bring men home, warning her that people will think she is easy. He completely ignores her feelings, pivoting immediately to asking her to hang up his suit and wondering if he should make ramen because he's hungry. As Nataka hums happily while changing, Harui realizes she has become nothing more than a convenient roommate or housekeeper to him. She understands now that his earlier anger wasn't born of love or jealousy, but simply because his pride was wounded. She knows he would never treat the other woman this carelessly. In the kitchen, Nataka casually prepares instant noodles and asks if Harui wants some. Staring at his back, Harui makes her decision. She calls his name and says firmly, "Let's break up." Nataka turns around, confused and unable to process what she just said. Harui repeats herself clearly, "I said I want to break up." As silence fills the room, Harui knows there is no turning back, but she couldn't stop herself from saying the words. Nataka stares at Harui in shock, trembling as he processes her sudden declaration. He feels like he is being attacked by her words, asking what is wrong all of a sudden. Harui looks back at him with a mixture of sadness and resignation, realizing that before saying, "break up," she should have simply asked him to treat her with more care. She thinks to herself that the time has passed to ask for reassurance of his love. The heavy tension is broken by the sound of the ramen pot boiling over on the stove. Nataka panics and rushes to turn it off while Harui watches blankly. As he cleans the sticky mess in the sink, Nataka casually explains that the phone call earlier was just a junior colleague who wasn't feeling well, which is why he was talking to them. Harui questions him, finding it weird that a junior would call their boss crying late at night. Instead of explaining further, Nataka turns the table and asks if she is jealous. This snaps something inside Harui. She shouts, "That's enough." She angrily points out his hypocrisy. He unfairly accuses her of cheating with Mamiya, yet when it comes to his own suspicious behavior, he just makes excuses. She feels like she is just someone he can toss aside whenever he pleases. Seeing her distress, Nataka tries to apologize for doubting her and reaches out, but Harui screams at him to not come near her. Nataka grabs her hand firmly, insisting that he doesn't want to break up. He admits he was being childish because he was jealous too. Harui looks down at his hand holding hers, thinking that despite his words, she doesn't feel cherished by him anymore. She pulls her hand away and goes to take a bath, leaving Nataka alone in the kitchen, confused as to why she won't accept his reassurance. Later, Harui falls asleep on the living room sofa. Nataka finds her there and gently carries her to the bedroom so she doesn't catch a cold. As he tucks her in, he whispers that he wants to be with her forever and hopes she didn't mean what she said about breaking up. However, Harui is actually awake. She opens her eyes in the dark thinking, "What the heck?" She feels a strange relief from finally saying the words, "break up," and finds herself confused by Nataka's refusal to let go when he doesn't seem to care about her feelings. She realizes she was actually terrified he would accept the breakup immediately, and now feels she is the one not making sense. Several days pass without the couple having a proper conversation about that night. Harui assumes Nataka is waiting for her to calm down, interpreting his silence as the same kindness that first attracted her to him. She thinks back to their first date at a cafe, where he disappeared and returned with a lap blanket because it was chilly. She remembers thinking that while he wasn't smooth, he was thoughtful. She recalls how he promised to cherish her when they started dating, a promise she happily believed. Back in the present, she sighs at her desk, wondering if she is currently misunderstanding Nataka just as he misunderstood the situation with Mamiya. Her friend Kazumi, Miura, approaches her in the break room, asking if she has marriage blues. Kazumi advises Hirai to keep her marriage quiet for another 6 months because the higher-ups are old-fashioned and view married women as unreliable. She warns that if the engagement becomes public, Hirai might be pulled off big projects to prevent potential delays, especially since Mamiya is performing so well. Hirai agrees to keep it secret. Left alone, Hirai looks at a gift bag she prepared, thinking that Mamiya's success isn't luck, but genuine skill. She catches herself thinking about how capable and considerate Mamiya is, and how he would never hurt a partner, but stops herself from comparing him to Nataka. After her lunch break, she tries to find Mamiya to return his coat but misses him. Later in the hallway, she finally runs into him. She hands him his cleaned coat and a small thank you gift. Mamiya realizes she had been waiting by the restroom to catch him and feels bad that she went to such trouble. Mamiya asks if he can take her to lunch to return the favor. Hirai panics, thinking this will create a cycle of debt and is too risky regarding Nataka, so she insists the gift is just coffee beans and nothing special. Mamiya smiles and admits he didn't ask just to repay her, he simply thought going to lunch with her would be fun. Hirai laughs it off as a smooth social nicety, but Mamiya looks at her seriously, telling her she doesn't need to be so considerate. He realizes she is declining to avoid making her boyfriend misunderstand again and apologizes. Suddenly, a man named Kurosawa from QG Design approaches them. He introduces his new hire, a young woman named Yashitake. As Hirai exchanges introductions, she smells a specific perfume. She looks at Yashitake's face and freezes, realizing with absolute certainty, it's her, the woman from the station who was with Nataka. Hirai freezes as she recognizes the young woman standing before her. It is Yashitake, the very same woman she saw clinging to Nataka at the station. Beside her, Mamiya notices Hirui's sudden shift in demeanor and asks if something is wrong. Thinking quickly to cover her shock, Hiroi stammers that she simply hasn't received her new business cards yet since transferring departments. Mamiya smoothly plays along with the lie to protect her, but the tension is thick. Kurosawa, the woman from the design firm, then drops a bomb in casual conversation. She mentions that Hiroi is with Tanaka from our company. Mamiya's eyes widen as he connects the dots, realizing Hirai is engaged to the man she was fighting with. Kurosawa, oblivious to the specific tension but aware of office politics, pulls Hiroi aside. She advises Hiroi to keep the marriage quiet for now, warning that the company's higher-ups are old-fashioned and might cut her workload if they know she's engaged, especially with big projects on the line. Hiroi agrees, feeling the weight of yet another secret. As the elevator doors close on the design team, Yashitake offers a polite congratulations that feels laced with venom. Once the doors shut, her innocent facade drops into a nasty, triumphant smirk. Inside the elevator, even Kurosawa sighs, pitying Senior Tanaka for being engaged to someone like Hirai, completely unaware of the reality. Back in the hallway, Mamiya comments on the chilling nature of that laugh, having sensed the hostility. He tries to lighten the mood by suggesting they all go out for drinks sometime, but after he leaves, Hiroi is left trembling. The direct malice she felt from Yashitake confirms her worst fears. There really is something going on between that girl and Nataka. The story shifts to the following morning. Nataka is trying desperately to play the role of the perfect partner. He greets Hirai with a warm breakfast and shows her a box of strawberries sent by her family, excitedly suggesting they make jam together. He smiles brightly, talking about buying bread for tomorrow, and for a moment, the heavy air between them lifts. Over the next few days, they fall into a peaceful, domestic rhythm. They don't speak of the breakup or the fight. Instead, Nataka fills their time with plans. Shopping, movies, seeing the Christmas lights. Hirai notices his desperation. He is terrified of losing her and is trying to overwrite the bad memories with sweet ones. As they stand in the kitchen washing strawberries and boiling sugar, Nataka jokes and feeds her a taste of the jam. He even makes a clumsy avocado sandwich that makes them both laugh. In these gentle moments, seeing him smile at her like he used to, Hirai finds herself wanting to believe him. She tries to convince herself that the night at the station was just a misunderstanding, or perhaps a one-sided crush from the girl. Christmas arrives and they go on a picture-perfect date. They walk through the illuminated streets, and Nataka apologizes sincerely for forgetting her birthday. He even takes her to a jewelry store to look at engagement rings, telling her how beautiful one looks on her finger. Walking home, flushed with happiness and carrying bags of scones for their jam, Nataka grabs Harui's hand tightly. He tells her it feels like they are back to when they first started dating. Harui squeezes back, letting herself hope that maybe they can actually fix this. But as they walk, Nataka begins to say something about tomorrow. Suddenly, a voice calls out, "Senior." They both stop. Standing directly in their path is Yashitake. The wind blows past them, chilling the air instantly. Harui stares at the woman, and the fragile bubble of happiness she and Nataka had built instantly bursts. She realizes with sinking dread that they hadn't fixed anything. They had just covered the cracks with sweet moments. The unease she felt that day at the station comes rushing back. The problems they were carrying were never truly resolved. Harui grips the handles of her shopping bag so tightly her knuckles turn white, the leather creaking under the strain. She stares in shock at the woman standing before them, her breath catching in the cold air. Yashitake stands there with a look of feigned innocence, apologizing for stumbling upon them. She claims she was just wandering around and happened to end up near Nataka's place because she was feeling down and he was the only person she could think of. Harui's stomach churns. She knows you don't just accidentally wander to a specific residential area on a holiday. It feels deliberate. Nataka looks between the two women, clearly uncomfortable but leaning towards concern for his junior. Yashitake then asks the question that changes the dynamic. She notices they are together on a holiday and asks if they live together. When Nataka confirms it, Yashitake's expression shifts. For a split second, the fragile, teary-eyed facade drops, revealing a cold, dead-eyed stare that chills Harui to the bone. It is a look of calculation, not surprise. Immediately, Yashitake covers her face, crying and apologizing for getting in the way. She plays the victim perfectly. Nataka, falling for the act, turns on Harui. He scolds her for being suspicious, defending Yashitake by saying she is struggling with work and has circumstances she can't discuss at the office. Harui argues back, her voice trembling. She asks why he has to be the one Yashitake relies on, and why she has to come to his private home. She points out that Yashitake knows he is engaged. Nataka sighs deeply, looking exhausted by Harui's jealousy. He tells Harui she is being unreasonable and refuses to explain Yashitake's situation, shutting her out completely. As Nataka steps closer to comfort the sobbing girl, Harui sees it. Over Nataka's shoulder, Yashitake lowers her hands slightly and smirks. It isn't a sad smile, it is a nasty, triumphant sneer directed straight at Harui. It is a silent declaration of war. Harui realizes with horror that everything, the tears, the timing, the accidental meeting, is a performance. But when she tries to point it out, Nataka snaps at her to stop cornering the poor girl. Suddenly, Yashitake stumbles on the pavement. Nataka rushes to catch her, holding her close in a protective embrace. Harui watches, frozen, as the scene mirrors her own moment with Mamiya, but twisted into something painful. Nataka makes a decision that shatters the remaining piece of the evening. He tells Harui to go home alone. He insists he needs to walk Yashitake home because she lives nearby. Harui is left standing alone on the street, holding the bags of bread and scones they were supposed to enjoy together. She watches Nataka's back as he walks away with the other woman, wondering if he has been to her apartment before. Back in their apartment, the silence is suffocating. Harui sits in the dark, still wearing her coat. The clock on the wall ticks loudly, 50 minutes pass, then an hour. Her phone lights up, but it is just a sale notification, not the message from Nataka she is desperate for. Paranoia sets in. Harui wonders what they are doing. Is he inside Yashitake's room? Is he comforting her? She tries to tell herself Nataka would never cheat, but the doubt takes root. If a younger, tearful woman came onto him, would his heart sway? Finally, the door opens. Nataka returns, acting as if nothing significant happened. He casually mentions the strawberries her family sent and talks about breakfast, completely ignoring the emotional wreckage he left behind. As he washes his face, humming a tune, Harui looks at him with detached clarity. They know everything about each other, but there is no spark, no freshness, just the dull routine of roommates. She realizes that an engagement ring is just an object. It doesn't stop anything. Marriage protects legal rights, but it cannot bind a person's heart. Harui stares down at a piece of paper on the floor, overwhelmed by a terrifying thought. If feelings can change this easily, then what is the point of getting married at all? Harui stands frozen in the doorway of her apartment, staring at the empty space where she thought she could build a future. The clock ticks loudly, each second stretching the silence. She wonders if a marriage that starts with such distrust can even have a future. Is it possible to be happy when you're constantly hurting each other? Nataka walks past her into the kitchen, the sound of his footsteps echoing on the floor. He starts doing the dishes, his back to her. Haruai tries to clean up the spilled jam, her hands trembling. When she calls his name, he doesn't turn around. He continues to scrub a plate, coldly stating that she is misunderstanding the situation and that there is nothing going on between him and Yashitake. Haruai, exhausted by the gaslighting, simply says, well. She doesn't have the energy to fight, but she needs the truth. Nataka sighs, repeating that Yashitake has complicated issues and is unstable, so he has been listening to her. But when Haruai asks what kind of problems would require a late-night visit to a male superior's home, Nataka shuts her down, claiming he can't share someone else's private matters. Haruai feels like an idiot. The work problems were a lie, confirming that whatever is happening is personal. She confronts him, asking how she is supposed to trust him when he treats her like an outsider after 6 years together. She demands just one truth, but he remains silent. The distrust sticks to her like the stubborn jam on the counter, sticky, messy, and impossible to simply wipe away. She realizes she can no longer picture a future with him. The next day at work, Haruai looks exhausted. Her friend Miko notices and worries about her pale complexion. Suddenly, they see Kazumi, Mrs. Satake, being supported by her husband, Mr. Satake. Kazumi is sick but insists on attending an important client party that night. Mr. Satake, clearly worried about his wife, asks Haruai if she can take Kazumi's place at the party. Haruai hesitates, knowing it's Christmas Eve, but agrees. She reasons that she doesn't want to go home to the heavy atmosphere anyway. Miko excitedly offers to do her hair and makeup, thrilled that Haruai gets to go to a party with Mamiya. Haruai sighs, realizing everyone sees this as a perk, while she just feels pressure to not look bad next to the handsome Ace. In the powder room, Miko transforms Haruai, making her look stunning. Haruai feels a sting of insecurity about her age compared to the younger women in the office, but Miko encourages her to hold her head high. As they finish, Miko mentions how lucky Haruai is to have a long-term boyfriend, implying that Haruai is safe and won't cause drama by being around Mamiya. This comment hurts Haruai in a different way. She realizes she is seen as the harmless old lady, who is no threat to the single women chasing Mamiya. She forces a smile, acknowledging the truth of it while feeling the sting of being put in a box. Haruai walks through the office in her borrowed dress and heels, feeling awkward. The shoes are slightly too big, making her steps unsure. She wonders if Mamiya is already waiting for her. As she rounds the corner, she spots him. Mamiya is standing there in formal wear, looking like he stepped out of a fashion magazine. He is so dazzling that Haruai feels a sudden urge to hide. The visual contrast between his polished perfection and her own internal mess makes her hesitate. She thinks to herself, maybe I really don't want to stand next to him after all, feeling unworthy and overwhelmed by his presence. At the party, Mamiya is literally glowing. He is surrounded by light, admirers, and compliments, shining in the spotlight as the perfect prince, who handles business effortlessly. Even his interactions are bright. He smiles warmly, his hair is perfectly styled, and he radiates a golden aura of success and charm. When he helps Haruai, he escorts her like Cinderella, creating a dazzling princess experience that feels like a fairy tale. In stark contrast, Haruai's thoughts of Nataka are clouded in darkness. While watching Mamiya shine, she imagines Nataka's likely reaction to her scraped feet, dismissal and annoyance in a dim, unromantic setting. Her memories of their recent fights are shadowy and suffocating. Even when she's with Mamiya, the shadow of her relationship looms over her. She feels guilty for enjoying the light, worrying that her happiness is a betrayal. This visual dichotomy highlights the emotional reality. Mamiya represents a bright, hopeful possibility where she is cherished and seen, while Nataka represents a dark, stagnant reality where she is invisible and hurt. The story continues at the party. Haruai feels out of place next to the dazzling Mamiya, worrying that people are judging her as an older lady. Mamiya, however, is attentive. He notices her discomfort in the borrowed heels and smoothly suggests they leave early. In the lobby, an old college friend of Mamiya's bumps into them and mistakes Haruai for Mamiya's ex-girlfriend, Kumiko. Mamiya quickly corrects him, but the friend spills that Mamiya messaged Kumiko immediately upon returning from Singapore, implying lingering feelings. Mamiya brushes it off, but Haruhi notices the tension. As they leave the venue, the cold wind hits them. Mamiya realizes he forgot his coat in the excitement, shivering slightly. He asks Haruhi if she has time to grab a meal, admitting he's starving since they didn't eat at the party. Haruhi hesitates. She knows she should go home to Nataka, who is likely waiting. But the thought of returning to that heavy, silent apartment fills her with dread. She compares the warmth and fun of being with Mamiya to the Cold War waiting at home. Deciding to delay the inevitable pain, she agrees to dinner. She reasons that she owes Mamiya for his help and just wants a simple meal. But deep down, she knows she is choosing the light over the darkness, if only for a little while. As they walk to the restaurant, Haruhi feels a pang of guilt, wondering why something as simple as dinner feels like a crime because of Nataka. Suddenly, Mamiya stops walking. He looks at her seriously and says, "Let's go home, Haruhi." It seems he has sensed her hesitation and guilt, once again prioritizing her feelings over his own desire to spend time with her. Haruhi stops dead in her tracks, her heart pounding in her chest. Standing directly in front of them is Nataka, his face twisted with suspicion and anger. He doesn't greet her. Instead, he immediately demands to know why she is there and not at home. Before Haruhi can even process his sudden appearance, Nataka's eyes dart to Mamiya, and he aggressively asks if she is cheating on him. Haruhi tries to explain, but Nataka grabs her arm roughly, his grip tight and painful. He ignores her protests, pulling her towards him as if she were an object he needs to reclaim. Mamiya, who had been standing quietly, suddenly steps in. He places a hand firmly on Nataka's arm, calmly but with an undeniable intensity, telling him to stop being so rough with her. Nataka glares at Mamiya, warning him to back off because he is taking his fiancée home. He turns and tries to drag Haruhi away by force. Haruhi winces, stumbling because her feet are screaming in pain from the unfamiliar heels. Mamiya speaks up again, his voice sharp this time. He points out what Nataka completely failed to notice. Haruhi's feet are injured and bleeding from the shoes. He scolds Nataka for dragging her when she can barely walk, exposing Nataka's lack of care compared to Mamiya's attention to detail. Later, inside the suffocating silence of their apartment, the fight shifts from physical to emotional. Nataka stares at Haruhi, asking the question they have both been avoiding: is she serious about ending their marriage? Haruhi sits alone, looking down, and admits that they have been out of sync for a long time. She feels the trust they built over 6 years crumbling into dust, unable to be repaired. Nataka stands up and grabs a travel bag. He tells her he can't stay there tonight. He decides to go to a manga cafe or a capsule hotel to put some physical distance between them. As he heads for the door, he adds that he won't be coming to her parents' house for New Year's either, effectively canceling their future together as he walks out into the cold night alone.